Hi everyone, this is a panel discussion which is being pre-recorded as part of the Kildare PPN Climate Action Weekend. And I suppose at the time of recording, we're in the middle of COP26. We've had a lot of big climate events during the year. The Climate Action Bill has been signed into legislation. But really what we want to chat about today is communities and how we can all get involved and what we can do at local level. And I'm delighted to have a bunch of people here who are all extremely passionate and committed to climate action. And we're going to begin by introductions, and I'll ask Vanessa to start.
Hi, Anna, and hi everyone. I'm delighted to be here this evening. So yeah, my name is Vanessa Liston, and I am a mum of 3 teenagers, and I live in Maynooth. And I suppose I got interested in climate action from way back when I was a student, and a lot of what I've done in my life has really been looking for ways that we can really advance and get a lot of serious climate action. But I guess in the last local elections, I thought, well, this is time to actually step up and see, can I do it in a different way? Because local government has always been a great curiosity to me, and seeing a lot of opportunity in there as well. So I ran for election and am now a local councillor in Kildare, working for Celbridge Leixlip area, and I'm also involved with Climate Response Ireland in Celbridge and also with the Green Forum there. So that's me.
Great, thanks Vanessa. Jude?
Hi, okay, so my name is Jude, and I'm a biology teacher, so I've always been interested in the environment and stuff, and with teaching it and all, and I'm involved in the green schools in school. But a couple of years ago I did a course in climate action, community climate action, and out of that I learned a lot about how awful the climate situation is, and from that I got voted in as a rep for a strategic policy committee, the Climate Action Strategic Policy Committee. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and also working with our own local group here. We myself and my sister joined the Tidy Towns and kind of took it over and pushed it in a direction of climate action instead. So, and just to say that I suppose the thing that that pushed me into it is I really feel strongly that there should be a place for all animals, not just human beings, animals. And I find it very sad that we have such little biodiversity. That's something that really calls me, that biodiversity, we should be living in harmony with other animals and plants, that it shouldn't be all about us. That really wrecks my head. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks Jude. Liz?
Thanks Keena, thanks for organising this evening. So I am I'm on the Secretariat of Kildare PPN. I was elected there in May. And then I'm also, from a community perspective, I'm very involved in NACE Biodiversity Group and NACE Sustainable Energy Community. It's kind of hard for me to my background is I have a corporate background in communications and public relations, but I also, most importantly, have 3 little people at home, 3 primary school children. And it's hard for me to kind of pinpoint the one thing that got me involved in all of these different environmental initiatives. But I do think that when my 3 little people started arriving into my life, I became really, really aware of just how consumeristic a society we had become. I think that was the real wake-up call for me. There's something about when you have children and you suddenly whether it's toys, it's clothes, it's gifts, there's this whole world opens up, and you suddenly realize, and it's all of the production, the packaging, the shipping of all of those things really was a wake-up call for me. And that was sort of just, I started getting really interested in the issue, started reading a lot about environmental issues, and then that obviously that broadened out over the years into biodiversity, learning all I can in that area. energy issues, you know, so because obviously it's enormous, but that's sort of how I became interested in environmental issues.
Great, thanks, Liz. Chris?
Oh, this is never the fun part. Sorry. So yeah, I'm Chris. Like Liz, it is really difficult to pinpoint what got me involved in climate action, because I suppose for me in college, I was like, I mean, you're talking about back when I was 16, 17, 18. I'm not going to tell you how long it's been since that. I'm holding on to my youth for dear life. But I would have gotten involved with climate action initiatives because I was in college down in Castlebar, all of these kind of things. And then later in life, to be honest, and I think this is something that's really important, I burnt out. I got sick of it. I couldn't deal with it. It was really depressing, and like it just made me so angry, which was exhausting. And it wasn't until kind of, again, I started getting involved with kind of other local campaigns, whether that was tidy towns or whether it was like a local community garden, whatever. I started getting involved in these campaigns. But then what kind of really rang true for me was how much climate action permeates everything. So I suppose I would have gotten involved quite heavily in kind of housing action groups or housing groups and things like this, and looked into kind of the international issues where climate action is becoming a serious issue. And we, as a result, we have refugees coming to our country, which is absolutely amazing. I think we should be taking more, to be honest. But you're talking about displacement of people. You're talking about people being moved to different places. And that is kind of what spurred me to get involved in climate action. So like I don't know whether to say I'm unlucky that I don't have children, or I'm lucky that I don't have children. I think different parents would say different things. But I have nieces and nephews who they've kind of steered and geared my life to different ways. And it was very much like Vanessa, it was through that involvement and a little bit of an obsession with politics that no person should ever have, that I ran for local elections back in 2019, the same as Vanessa, and was elected as a councillor for the Kildare Newbridge Municipal District. But again, through that work, I've seen how it permeates everything, whether that's housing, whether it's like healthcare, whether it's consumerism, whether it's public transportation, anything like this. Like, I am not a driver. I refuse to own a car, partially because I can't afford it, partially because it's an actual choice. But I suppose for me, climate action is really important. And I think we can't talk about climate action without talking about the like just transition, without ensuring that we bring everybody with us. And as a public transport user, that's been kind of one of the biggest campaigns that I've pushed for, because I firmly believe the more we have it, the more affordable it is, the more people will actually use it when it can actually get us from point A to point B. So that would be one of the biggest campaigns I'm involved in locally at the minute.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Fionnuala.
Hi, thanks, Tina. I'm Fionnuala. I live in Kilcock in County Kildare. I guess I've been a little bit aware of climate issues for many years, but then immersed in the busyness of life, I kind of put them on the back burner and went and developed a career in business and in capital markets banking. I had 3 children who are now, my baby is 19, so they're all grown up. And then, but I mean, I guess I kind of coming at it from a slightly different perspective, maybe not. I guess a lot of people in our world, our privileged world, we're looking for meaning and happiness in our lives. And I always felt like I was searching, and I changed career. I retrained as a physical therapist because I wanted to do something good for the people, and I was interested in health, and that helped. And that definitely helped. It was definitely a big change from capital markets banking. You know, growing and giving birth to three children, and that you know, you can see it as good or bad, but it's it certainly keeps you busy, and trying to be a good mother. But I always felt like the way we lived, there was something wrong with it, and I could never quite put my finger on it. And Then as I became less busy with looking after children, I began to have more time to find out about other things, and I became more interested in climate action. I was always interested, but I had time now to be more interested. And then I did the course that Jude was talking about, the Kildare Communities for Climate Action course, and started learning a lot more about it. And I kind of came to realize that what the thing is that missing is human connection and communication. Like the global south are busy trying to survive, but we're busy striving for happiness, and we're all striving by engaging in consumerism, which is never going to work. And like, dare I say, I have been as depressed that Chris mentioned there, and very upset by all the things that are going on, but at the same time I've never been happier, because I've been really engaged and made amazing connections with people. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on it.
That's great. Thanks, Fionnuala. And it's amazing to see all the common threads, and, you know, the idea of climate anxiety, I suppose, is really interesting, because I think we've all experienced that at some point. And for myself, because I have a grandchild, I'm very conscious that the world that she will be living in is going to be very different than the world I'm living in. So that's always in the back of my head. I think we've all touched on sort of why we're here. Is there a particular issue that anybody is passionate about? I mean, for me, I think probably the social justice is key, I think. But does anybody else have a particular interest? So anybody can come in here on this one.
I'm really interested in the peatlands that we have, and I suppose that's what I would suggest to anyone that is getting involved in this sort of stuff, that you find something that you're passionate about and just get stuck into it, because like Fionnuala says, and Chris, it's pretty depressing. All of the stuff that's out there. When we were doing that course, some of the stuff was like horrendous. But if you find something that you're like passionate about and really get stuck into that, so I've gotten involved with this proposal of the Kildare National Peatlands Park, and I just think it's fantastic, and I think that's a way of, and we've said this before, I know Fionnuala said this, that when you get immobilized by the size of the problem, it really helps to get in action about it. Yeah, I think you need to, but you do need to find something, and it does take a while to like look at all the different areas and go, well, what's something that I'm willing to really get stuck into? And yeah, I'm really passionate about that, because I think we're very lucky to have bogland in this country, and you see the Dutch used up all of theirs, starting in the 1700s, used it all up, and they're so I mean, they're so devastated by that. They actually bought a couple of bogs for us to conserve and stuff. So when you see other countries and they're envious of what we have, I think that we really need to preserve what we have, and rehabilitation. And yeah, that's, I just think it's crazy not to, because they're fantastic for carbon sequestration, and that's something that we're going to be paying huge fines for if we don't cop on and preserve what we have. And I think it's going to be a beautiful amenity for people as well, and a wilderness. And I think that's really important for people, for their spirits to have some wilderness. I think that it's really important for us to experience wilderness, and children and everything to experience that. So yeah, that's my passion.
Absolutely. Does anybody else want to come in? Have you a particular project or thing that you want to talk about? Because yeah, go ahead, Fionnuala.
Yeah, I mean, it was Jude saying, it's such a difficult question. When I set up Kilcock for Climate Action, we brainstormed, and we had so many different, we're going to change the world. Because as Chris said, climate change changes everything, or it encompasses everything. It encompasses so many different things. And then that can become overwhelming. And we tried then to break it down into goals under food, under energy, under transport, under social justice, under global issues, and then break those goals into tasks. But even still, it kind of got stuck. It didn't really take off. And then some people said to me, you know, push what moves. So find the thing that's actually working and find a thing that you like doing. Because there was areas that I would have had to do lots of research, lots of reading, really educate myself in, and I didn't have the time for that. Or there was areas that I would read things about it and I was like, oh, that's just boring. I just can't make myself do that. So you have to, I think it's really important there's so many things, but you do, to be honest, I don't think it matters what you do, because climate change is everything. There's so many things. The biggest thing I think is for our adaptation and mitigation. So, you know, how we adapt to what is going to happen and how we reduce the effects of what is happening and try and mitigate them or reduce them, is about building community and building relationships. So so it doesn't matter what you're in. If you like, so what I ended up doing was setting up a community garden, and now we've got plans for 2 more community gardens in Kilcock. So soon Kilcock will have 3 community gardens, which I just think is amazing. It's not going to change the world, but it's helping to build community. And we've also set up a sustainable energy community. So, and I feel like I can do those things, but there's other things that I just can't do. Like, don't ask me to get involved in the PPN, and don't ask me to get involved in anything more political, because it's just, I can't, I'll just get too frustrated. But I can do those things. So I think, you know, it's about finding your niche, kind of as Jude was saying.
That's great. Thanks, Vanessa. And I want to come back after the next question. I want to come back to groups and how to get involved. But I just want to ask everybody, do you think enough is being done, both at local and national level? And I'm going to start with Vanessa on that one.
Well, I suppose if you think, what is the word enough? I mean, the more that we do or the less that we do, it's just the amount of, what's the amount of negative consequences that we're going to tolerate. So, you know, I think that's the ultimate decision, and we're not going to know that. So there is never enough that can be done. We have to keep pushing for more. But I think in terms of, yes, what's happening now is happening with very much within the status quo way of looking at things, if I can put it that way. And I think even just going back to the last question, I think one of the great opportunities around climate change and around that question of, is there enough being done, is that never before have we really asked, is this just, is this right? In our society, we have all sort of been competitive. We've all been operating within that system that Liz mentioned earlier. But now we have the chance, because we need to step out of the way we're doing things. So even though we may say, you know, are we pursuing enough targets? Are we pursuing enough emissions? Are we building enough cycle lanes? Are we doing enough of these things? I think that we haven't even started looking at the real transformation that we need, which is that transformation of power, the transformation of how decisions are made, and, you know, just really advancing that idea of what's right and just, and connecting together as communities, not necessarily in doing actions, but really in having this social pact that communities can have a huge transformative power. So I think, are we doing enough? We're doing some. We need to do a lot more of what we've already started to do, but I really think that we need to start talking about creative thinking. Are we happy with the way policies made or the way decisions are made? Because that's all open to change. Everything we are doing can be changed, and it's just a matter to start opening that conversation. For example, are we not doing local assemblies, you know, really bringing communities together, understanding why do we all have different perspectives of climate change? What are they? And can we come together to actually tease this out and problem solve and come up with our suggestions, our visions, our solutions? Because the fact is that we have very blunt tools for understanding how people think. If we go back to the recent survey, I think was published by Antashka just yesterday, you know, that showed something, really small numbers care about climate change, but actually, if we ask the question differently, we can be quite sure that's not actually the fact. Just, do we have the right tools? And then, do we have the right tools for decision making? Is that gap between local government and communities too big? Are there ways that we can collaborate more together? So I think there's huge opportunity in the transformation, and I think we should really start tackling that question and doing more on that.
Thanks, Vanessa. That's really interesting, actually, and I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think touching as well maybe on the media and how the media have framed climate change, or how the media report on climate change, I think is another huge issue. And there's been a lot of change in that area very recently, which is fantastic. But yeah, still a huge amount needs to be done. So Jude, what do you think? Are we doing enough?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think something has to be done like on a large scale, like that. It's I think the onus is put back on communities an awful lot, and individuals and stuff. And I think that's good, because I think people need to know that this is coming down the line. But I think I think the politicians and I'm talking about TDs, like they need to be thinking like about the long-term thing. So not just the like short-term goals, but they really need to be thinking like long-term. I know with the peatlands, they're Board and One are looking to put turbines on the peatlands, and I mean we didn't get wind for 6 months of last year, which is, so putting wind turbines on them is complete waste of time. It's more expensive to set up offshore wind, but you see, it's I'd imagine, maybe I'm wrong, but I'd imagine that if you're going to take an awful lot of chunk of the money that government have and put it into like a long-term investment like that, it may not be as popular as doing something that's short-term but doesn't really work. Like, so I think that we need to be doing stuff. The government needs to be doing stuff like on a large scale that really is forward thinking, and it's long lasting, and it's whether it's what's the word, whether it's popular or not. I think that people have to be like really like kind of what's the word, ruthless about things, I suppose. And that, if things and I just worry about that. I worry that people because they're trying to protect their own interests, that their own political interests, and no offense to the two councillors that are on here, but that their own political interests, that they may not be doing what's right for. And I think that's really important, because no matter how much we do, no matter how many gardens Fionnuala has in Kilcock, and even if this proposal for the National Peatlands Park in Kildare goes ahead, it's still only 7,000 hectares of bogland, and we've got 80,000 owned by Board and Mona. And if Board and Mona, this might sound like a really awful thing to say, but if Board and Mona were pushed into handing that land back to the Irish people and saying, okay, we're going to use this as an amenity, for carbon sequestration, as a wilderness, as for tourism, for all those things. And yes, Board and Mona may have, that would be probably a very, very unpopular thing to say, because people would say, oh, what about just transition? And I don't know, I could be wrong, but of course I agree that there should be a just transition for people and stuff. But sometimes I feel like, and I could be completely wrong about this, but that it's just some people hanging on to the position that they have, instead of going, well, what's the best thing for our future generations? What's the best thing for the country? And like, sucking it up for that, because I think that's where we are. We're at a crisis point, and we have to be brutal about things. And there's certain things that don't work. Putting onshore wind doesn't work. Offshore wind works. Using our peatlands to, and this is just examples of the stuff that I'm interested in, using our peatlands for data centres, and which is the plan with Board and Mona, or turbines, or biodigesters digesters is a disastrous idea, because at biomass I wouldn't even consider that a good energy source. It produces carbon as well, so it makes no sense to do it. So yeah, I think systemic change, that like really huge things, and also huge shifts in our thinking as a society as well. Like I don't know how that's going to happen, but huge shifts in our society, that we think more as a group, like you say, rather than individuals, that has to change. Like we have to work together rather than working individually. So both systemic, individual, community, everything.
Thanks, Jude. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the short-term nature of our political system makes it extremely hard for things to be done at a political level when you're looking at a really long-term problem. And in relation to the just transition, I think for me there's a distinction between genuine just transition and just transition as it is sometimes used by vested interests for their own gain. So, you know, for me, just transition is about the people who are most likely to be impacted or adversely kind of affected, that they're basically taken care of, you know. Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an important question, you know, is enough being done? And I think, I mean, I think the reality is, the short answer to that is no, not yet, because we're missing targets all over the place around emissions and water quality and air quality and all of those things. But I do think, I think there's a big shift happening at the moment. I think that this period of time, and I'm trying to think what I even mean. Do I mean, I think there's something about, I think this 2 to 3 years, I think there's a lot of change happening, I think. And I think, Cliona, the point that you make about the media coverage is crucial. And there's been a big shift in the way RTE in particular, and let's face it, that's where a huge amount of people are getting what they see as their trusted information from. I think that is a really game-changing shift. And I think some of the really challenging arguments that we're seeing now, particularly around agriculture, the huge amount of focus on ag at the moment, but I think that's really healthy that those conversations are now happening. The reality is they weren't, and that tension I think we're seeing, I think that's all part of this shift, this change that's happening. You know, we have our climate law now. It was hard getting it across the line. You know, the next stage is going to be really, really hard now that we're looking at actual you know, climate budgets. So look, I think the short answer is no, there isn't enough happening, but I think I'm starting to feel a little bit more optimistic that, you know, Jude, as you said, there's an awful lot happening at a community level, which is brilliant, and I think reflects where people are, where individuals are. Obviously then you have, you know, you've COP26, which is the other end, the really, really giant stuff, which sometimes feels so far away, it's hard to understand what that'll mean for us. But I do think this kind of next 12 to 24 months, I think we're going to start seeing it. I mean, we're seeing climate being discussed everywhere. It's all over local area plans. I think climate literacy is improving significantly in county councils, amongst our politicians. It's not always straightforward. It's not always, you know, a linear improvement, but I think we have. I'm starting to feel a little bit optimistic about the next 2 years. But I'm glad as well that eco-anxiety has been mentioned here. I think it's appropriate that it's mentioned, because certainly the last 10 years was very hard to watch. That it just seemed like we were going the opposite direction, you know. So
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, I agree. I do definitely feel a shift at the moment. I think we're at a pivotal point in history, you know, and hopefully things, you know, things have to change, but hopefully they will change speedily and with everybody on board. So Chris, what do you think? Are we doing enough?
Like Liz said, short answer, no. But like, I mean, I suppose there have been things that have been done. Like, I mean, there's no point in saying nothing's being done. There's no point in saying that everything is bad and everyone's going to heck or whatever. Like, we have to realize is that there have been things done, but have those things that have been done, like, are they enough? I really don't think so. I really think that we can be braver, we can be leaders, very much like Jude has said. We can push for bigger things, and like yourself, Tina, I mean, I make a massive distinction between genuine just transition and just transition for soundbite's sake. And that's what I call it. I call it just transition for soundbite's sake, because you'll have loads of people who use it, but use it very much like Jude has said as a cop-out. Like, for me, just transition is ensuring that if you're going to introduce a carbon tax, that you ensure that it doesn't cause a family to have to choose between feeding their kids and heating their home. Like, it really is that simple. And absolutely, like, I mean, I think councils have, to a certain level, they've progressed somewhat better than national, because what's happened is you have climate action groups that are leading the way within their local councils. Don't get me wrong, I think it was interesting to hear Jude talk about the fact that she was talking about TDs and not councillors, but we have a role in this too. And like, I mean, we need to be held accountable too. You can't let us off the hook either, because the reality is we do have somewhat of a semblance of control over how the council budget is spent. We do have interactions and engagements with the Climate Action Regional Office. Some councillors sit on the Climate Action SPC, but I think it's important that we don't just focus on the Climate Action SPC. Personally, and it's not a very popular opinion, but I don't think we ever should have had a Climate Action SPC. I think we should have had a Climate Action seat on every single SPC, because, like I said, for me, climate action permeates everything, whether that is environment and waste, whether that is transport and emergency planning, whether that is housing, like local economic development. Like, all of these things involve and incorporate climate action. All of these things should be involving and incorporating just transition. So no, we're not doing enough, but we can do more. It just takes it takes a little bit more bravery. Like, it takes a little bit more, I don't even know how to say it. Like, it's you know that, you know, when you're working on something and you give it everything you possibly have to the point where you feel like you're going to collapse on the side of a street, but there's always that little tiny bit that you can kind of push. I feel as though, I don't feel like national politicians or national government have even reached the point where they feel a tingle, never mind the exhaustion that many people on the ground feel. I think local authorities are starting to feel that tingle, and I think it's up to the likes of myself and Vanessa as local representatives to ensure that we're pushing from a policy perspective, ensuring that we're pushing from that level. But I also think there is a level of responsibility on communities. Now, I'm not talking about personal responsibility as in making sure you put your cardboard in the recycling bin. Don't get me wrong, recycling, reducing, repairing, reusing, all of that's important. But there is only so much personal responsibility will do. So it is on us as citizens of Ireland, as people who can vote, as people who can push this, as people who can talk to their politicians, to start pushing it. Like, there's only so much power that we have as normal, like as your average Joe. So there's only so much power myself or Vanessa or any other councillor has. And again, there's only so much power that a TD has. And all of that power comes from one thing, and that's people's ability to vote and choose and push for policy to be made a certain way, or push for policy to be done a certain way. And again, like I said, I don't think we've done enough. I think we can do more. And I think so many people want to do more. They just don't know how. And I think people need to realize that it's actually a lot easier than you think to get involved in this kind of thing. It's also very easy to run away from it. Like I said before, but like I think we can do more. I definitely think we can do more. And now I'm rambling, so I'm going to shut up before you shut me up.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, no, a couple of points there that I hope we're going to go on and discuss a little bit more, but the idea of climate change being embedded in everything, I think, is really important, you know, because within councils and you know, even in the media, things are siloed into little boxes, and you're completely right, climate change has to be everywhere and within everything. And I really do want to go on and talk about how people can get involved and what they can do, but I'm just going to ask Fionnuala what she thinks of the question, are we doing enough?
Okay, I'll try and give a quick answer. I think the answer is no, we're definitely not doing enough. I know we've done lots of things, but it's nowhere near enough. And I think we're not telling the truth. I think national and international government bodies are really not telling people. I think the majority of the population still believe that we can fix this if we do lots of technology and lots of you know, solar power and all that. We can still continue to live the life that we have in the privileged Western world. And I believe that the answer is we can't. We actually have to completely change the system. We have to completely change the way we live. Completely, absolutely, radically change the way we live. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, because if you go and see who is happy in the average Western world, you know, we're doing so many things and pursuing so many activities to try and make us happy, and it's not working. So I think we need to, like, there should be a lot more done nationally and internationally about educating people about, not even about climate change, but about how we should live, how humans work, what makes humans feel connected and empowered and, you know, develop and grow as humans. And I think if we can fix that, you know, that we can fix an awful lot of things, but we have to change it completely. Like our whole ideas, even around ownership, are completely wrong. You know, Indigenous people look at land ownership and they think, how can you own land? Can you own this piece of air? No, don't be silly. So like our whole ideas around the way our whole systems are, I think, has to completely change. Otherwise, we're really only putting a plaster on the problem, and it's not going to fix. And that sounds terrible, and some people are going to go, oh my God, like, she's crazy, we can't deal with this. But I think that whole idea can be communicated as a good thing, because for me, it's been an amazing thing. That realization, and that where you don't get your happiness by having the best handbag or the newest handbag or buying more, having more clothes in your wardrobe. You really get it by connecting with other human beings and feeling like you can do things together. And I think that we need to, like, people, I know Chris was saying there about, you know, individually and even as a councillor, you've only got so much power, but I think we have way more power than we believe. I think as individuals, and we need to empower people. I think we've been disempowered over the years with our political systems and everything. All the individuals, we've been disempowered, and we think, well, we can't, nothing I do will make any difference. You know, there's me and there's China. Like, what can I do to do all this and that, all the emissions from China? But I don't agree. I think as we can change society, and the only people that can change society is society itself. There's some study done about all the big societal changes made over the years, like even slavery and all of that. It only takes 3% of the population to actually make massive changes. And to me, like, that's very heartening to think that we can do that. But I do think we're not doing anywhere near enough. Sorry, I'll stop now. Rambling.
Thanks, Fionnuala. Yeah, look, that would be very much the perspective I'm coming from as well. You know, that we need huge systemic change. We need to rethink our values. We need to rethink how we live. You know, we need to just completely take it out of that sort of political field and all those kind of smaller little segments and just really look at the big picture. But that kind of brings me on to, you know, everybody here is very passionate. We're talking about, you know, huge topics here, and it's hard to cover everything, but I suppose to bring it down to basics, and everybody has kind of talked about this, you know, the power of what you can do individually And I don't mean, you know, in the sense that, you know, everybody's responsible for recycling. I mean, just as Chris said, and Fionnuala, you mentioned it, just that power to actually really engage and to keep pushing the issues and to do all that. So if, you know, somebody in Kildare is kind of thinking, I would love to get involved, but I don't know how to start or how to do this, you know, what would be your advice? And I know, Vanessa, you've set up groups. We've all been involved in groups in various shapes and form, and Vanessa and Chris are obviously in the council. So just anybody can come in here. What would be your advice to people who just are completely on the outside and want to, you know, get started?
Yeah, I just think like, yeah, just get involved with whatever is there already, because they're only looking for help. And the poor three people that we were down in Calverstown, Tidy Towns, before we went down, they were completely worn out because they've done everything for the last 15 years. And then we just veered it in a kind of a climate action kind of direction, and sure, they were delighted because they just had, and now we have 16 people in the group. So it's gone from 3 because people wanted to get involved in climate action, but they thought that the Tidy Towns was too narrow a kind of narrow field. So yeah, I definitely say that. And I'd also say, if there's a group that are doing something that you're really like interested in, just ask them to lend a hand somehow, like, and get in there, because I know with this proposal I've kind of wiggled my way into the group, because I've set up the Facebook page and the what you call it, the Instagram page and stuff. So it's like, I suppose, like what Chris said, be brave, and you know, if there's an area that you're interested in, like, do whatever it takes to get involved in it, because it's really lovely to be working on something that you think is worthwhile. And when I got voted on as the Climate Action SPC rep, I did talk to the environmental officer in Kildare County Council, and I said to him, look, what would be worthwhile thing to do in the next 5 years in this term, like, and he said that he was saying like something to do with the peatlands would be really, really important, like really good thing to do. So I suppose, you know, to find something that you feel is satisfying, that this is a good chunk that is worth your time and your energy, because you're doing it all voluntarily. So so you really need to be, it needs to be something that you feel good about doing. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Thanks, Jude. I know Fionnuala wanted to come in there. I just got slightly distracted by Chris's cat in the background there. Who is super cute. So
yeah, well, I spoke to Jude about, it must be nearly 2 years ago, and she told me she had infiltrated the Tidy Town in Calverstown, and I just thought that was amazing. So I followed her example, and I went to a Tidy Towns meeting, and unfortunately I came home secretary, but anyway, it's all worked out for the best. But the thing about Tidy Towns is that they now have categories under sustainability and biodiversity. So they are actually very happy for people to get involved in anything that will, because they're happy to, they'll take credit when they're writing up their reports, even if you're only loosely affiliated with them, they'll take credit for anything that you've done. So I kind of set up the community gardens group, and then I asked Tidy Towns, well, you know, the community gardens group doesn't have any money and anything, and so they let them become a subgroup of Tidy Towns, which is great. So now they're paying for some of the stuff. We're trying to do it all very much zero cost, but they're still paying for little bits that we need. And then even because I also set up Kilcock for Climate Action, which is not really part of Tidy Towns, they're taking the credit for anything Kilcock for Climate Action does. So they're also happy to support me in all of that. So, you know, so I think Jude is right, just get in with the group. And like, as she said, the Kilcock Tidy Towns, there was about 6 people. They were all, I think I brought the average age down, and I'm not a baby, brought the average age down by about 15, 20 years. But we've started to get lots more people involved now. We've got and the people have a choice of how they want to get involved. They can get involved in the traditional tidy towns cleaning up, or they can get involved in the community gardens, and it's a great opportunity. Like when we spend time in the community garden, we spend a lot of time talking. So we cover also, you've got the real opportunity for educating people, and then, you know, they go home and talk about, we could be talking about anything, like at social justice, we could be talking about housing, we could be talking about anything on any particular day. And, you know, we're always learning, not just about gardening and food sustainability and permaculture and everything else, but we're learning so much. So yeah, get involved with tidy towns. It isn't the only way, but it's definitely worth pursuing if you have that availability. I mean, if not, I would say don't be afraid to set something up. Like I was, you know, I was really kind of nervous and scared, and I spoke with Vanessa before I set up Kilcock for Climate Action. She gave me some really good advice on, and just told me just do it and just go ahead and do it. And you know, you'll learn as you do it. So what if it doesn't work? And you often don't realize, like I'd sometimes have people coming up to me in the town and going, oh, you're doing great work. I have no idea who they are. Never met them before. Or I hear somebody telling me about something and I realize we started that. And it's the ripple effect. You don't realize what effect you're having. So, you know, just as they were all saying, be brave and just do it. If you feel like this is the right thing to do and it's something that you would like to do and get involved in, then do it. Yeah, go for it.
Thanks, Jude. I'm going to ask you next, Liz, because I want to ask Vanessa and Chris specifically more about the getting involved in policy and that whole side of it. So what do you think, Liz, like if somebody's coming in brand new?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the idea of getting involved in existing. I mean, I think I didn't check before I came on here, but I think there are about 40 groups that are registered with PPN that you know, under the environmental pillar. I think it's in around that number. So there is lots of stuff happening, and it's certainly good to start there, because you learn a bit about what's happening, and you learn how those groups are structured and which are successful and which are less successful, and you know, but you know, there's also a lot of stuff not yet happening. I mean, I think there's quite a lot, say, happening, to be very broad, to say, in the biodiversity space, biodiversity and nature space. I don't think there's half enough happening around active travel. I mean, our towns are absolutely dominated by cars, and I don't think we've enough groups really shouting loud enough about that. I know I've started talking to a couple of people locally about trying to start a critical mass event in Naas, you know, where you kind of bikes take over the road for an evening and kind of cause some pleasant disruption. I don't know if there's yet enough happening around like zero waste activities and food activities. I mean, the first zero waste store in the whole of Kildare opened in Naas only a few months ago. Like it's fantastic, but man, like we should have 20, you know. So while I definitely think it's good to engage in an existing group, I would also say don't be afraid to go out on your own. And you know, it's funny, Fanu, that you mentioned like I do think there's a space for younger people as well to become engaged and to set up community groups that are more relevant maybe to younger people, like in their teens or 20s or 30s, who are at different stages. Do you know what I mean? So I definitely would say, if there's something that you're interested in, check out what's there, get involved, learn. Some really valid points made about financing and practicalities around that, but also don't be afraid to go out on your own. Like I've mentioned the consumerism piece, I still think that's the bit that I see. That's the bit I think people aren't yet recognizing. I think, Phil, you mentioned about this idea that we're going to have to totally transform the way we live. We have a world that's completely built around convenience, and I don't think people are realizing yet how much that's going to have to change, you know. And I do think there is a space there for more groups to be kind of a bit more vocal around that kind of thing. So like this.
Brilliant, thanks, Liz.
Could I pop in there really quickly?
Yes,
just Liz said about trying to engage young people. Something just happened this week in Kilcock. The under 15s ladies GAA team contacted Tidy Towns to know could they do a cleanup day to get some funding. They were going to do a sponsor thing to get some funding to get new kit. So I got back to them and said, yes, you could, or you could come and help us set up one of the new community gardens. Which would, you know, give us an opportunity to talk to them, because when you're busy digging holes to plant apple trees or making permaculture beds, you've got lots of opportunities for talking. So you're talking, they're learning about permaculture, and that's what they've agreed to do. So I'm like, yay, because I've been thinking for ages, how do we get young people? How do I, all the teenagers walking through the garden, I'm saying, hi lads, hi girls, you know, chatting away to them and trying to get them to chat back to me, but not succeeding. And like, how to get them involved? And then this came up and I'm like, yes. This is so it's just opportunities, things will happen, you know. So
great, it's a good example.
Cool. Yeah, we definitely need to. I think young people, I mean, they're amazing. You know, they're doing so much themselves, but yeah, to kind of create more synergy between the different strands would be really good. And Liz, you mentioned the PPN, and that's because I'm going to lead into more of the policy stuff. But the PPN, I'm on the Secretariat with Liz, and the PPN is a great resource for grant funding. You know, it's a great connection point as well, and it also feeds into policy because Jude, as you mentioned, you're on the Climate Action SPC as a rep. So we have a climate action linkage group where people input and, you know, have a voice, I suppose, and then Jude and Ali bring that to the climate SPC. So that's really important as well. And I just wanted to ask Chris and Vanessa, I suppose, you know, there's a perception that you're a councillor, therefore you have lots of, I suppose, power. But I'm sure there are, you know, immense obstacles. And I just was wondering, what are your thoughts on, you know, how can we connect all the climate activists or, you know, the people involved on the ground with that political sphere? How can we magnify what you're trying to do? And, you know, likewise, how can you support what we're trying to do? So, Vanessa, do you want to?
Oh, thanks, Nina. I think that's, you know, it's a good question. With regard to obstacles, there's certainly a lot, just in terms of particularly Kildare, you know, you want to try and get something off the ground, there's a lack of resources, the lack of staff. So that's just the facts of the challenges that councillors come up against all the time, and I'm sure Chris will endorse that. But I think in terms of connecting up, one of my questions, I suppose, and I'd love to hear about, is the experience of the PPN reps on the SPCs, the strategic policy committees, as they're representing the public participation network, because that is a space for policy influence, but how effective is that in their experience? So I don't know if we have time to discuss that. But also in terms of, you know, pushing action within the council, I think it's very important that citizens, community groups, people working in groups, people outside of groups, show a demand, because it's very hard to get something through without that push and that evidence from the ground. And there's ways you can get that evidence. You can do it through the SPC, but for most people who are not in that space, you can show the demand. You can, by contacting your councillors, by getting people together mobilised around an issue. You can also get involved in citizen science. I mean, that's a hugely powerful way also of getting involved. For example, in Celbridge and Leixlip, there's water testing going on in collaboration with Maynooth University. There's air quality sensors going up. And that means that we can use this information with Climate Action Office or with the Climate Action officers in bringing policy and motions to council. And that's another very vibrant way of generating other knowledge rather than just waiting for, you know, the official data, which is important as well and has a specific role. But it's very empowering to generate your own information. Even tidy towns, what's in the bins, you know, what percentage is recyclable, you know, that can feed into the now review of the waste policies and all the rest that we're now discussing. The other thing is, and I suppose coming back to my original point was, and I'll go back to the question that you asked to everybody else in a moment, but it is about those spaces for coming together. So sometimes when there are groups, there can be natural boundaries around a group because it's on this issue and there's meetings and minutes, you know, there's certain boundaries that form a group. But many people are not in groups, but there can be spaces where people come together with interests or completely different viewpoints. And we tried that with the Green Forum before the pandemic. We were getting together in a space where all politicians from different parties, academics, community members, and I know Fanula was there as well, and no doubt Liz, and who else? Companies would come, and we'd take a common problem and try and work through policy or motion to bring to council. And at that, we did set out the parameters for a Climate Innovation Fund. There was a section of LPT funding. And I know Fanula was probably there that night as well. And collectively as a group, we set out the parameters of that fund. Then that was brought to all of the MD councillors in Deliberative who agreed it. And then that got implemented with 25,000 for climate innovations in Celbridge and Leixlip. And now the Climate Action Office is asking that all MDs will scale that up and do that because the impact was so great. So the point is just coming back to, you know, if we can create these spaces for coming together with ideas as well, and in addition to joining a group, I think that's another very powerful way to influence policy, because you can develop a motion or policy and ask for that to be advanced. And when something is written, informed by citizen science or different experiences, that can be very powerful. And just going back to your last question about how can anybody start as well. So apart from contacting your councillor or getting involved in policy and making submissions and so on, I think it's also maybe useful to think about, well, if we want to be resilient as a community, yes, we've got to reduce carbon emissions. We've got to stabilize our ecosystems. We've got to restore our natural environment, but we also have to be resilient as a community of people. And when we look forward to all the challenges that are going to come as a result of climate change, we need to think back, I think, to what we did during COVID. When people came out and helped each other, they just helped. They asked, do you need help? And they helped each other. And I think that when we're thinking about climate action, it can always also be as simple as, who can I help today? You know, and even if we want to help in the context of climate action, you know, somebody is cold, an elderly person, there's 100% grants now. Like maybe they don't know that, or it doesn't even have to be that complicated. But I think just getting across and doing very simple things about connecting, as everyone has said this evening, and just looking at to help each other is also climate action, because we're going to need that, and we did that so well during COVID.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think the whole community resilience idea is something we all need to build on. It's so important in working together and supporting each other. So Chris, in terms of how we can help you and you can help us, what are your thoughts?
Not gonna lie, Vanessa is a hard act to follow. But like, to be honest, I have to agree with a lot of Vanessa has said there, and especially reiterating her question in PPN representatives' kind of roles and how they feel that being on an SPC, like, is it useful? Is there a point? Do you feel like you're just a scapegoat so they can pretend that there's a community person in the background? Because I know I've spoken to some community reps, and that's exactly how they feel. They feel like they can't bring something to it. So I suppose that's one way we can help you and you can help us, is by letting us know if the system that is in existence is working, and if it's not, so that we can work together with ye to push for it to be changed so that it is more meaningful. There is no point in somebody going to SPC meetings over and over and over again if they feel as though they're not actually being given an opportunity to contribute or to have a say in policy formation or in policy reformation, for that matter. Because, like, I mean, not too long ago, like, oh god, it was actually one of my first motions to council, and it was in relation to Kildare County Council implementing a ban on mass balloon and fire lantern releases. That motion went to the Environment and Water Services SPC at the time, because the Climate Action one wasn't in existence. Then went to the Climate Action SPC. So then was supposed to go to the Climate Action SPC, but it vanished into the ether. So that's another way, like, and that is neither the fault of of councillors nor SPC representatives, and to be honest, not even county council staff, because what had happened was there was my motion itself, as I said, it was one of my first motions. It wasn't exactly clear in how it should be formed or where it should go. And I think that's something really important to bear in mind with county councillors, is that we're just bog standard people as well. Some of us have expertise in policy. Some of us have a very specific expertise in policy. I suppose some have IT backgrounds. Some have, like, I didn't run for county council as a policy expert. I ran for county council because when I looked at the others who were running in my area, I didn't see anybody who represented me. I'm somebody who has been homeless. I'm somebody who's been in homeless shelters, and I didn't see that in front of me on posters or on ballots or any of this kind of stuff. So for me, that's how I wanted to get involved. And I think people need to look to the public representatives, and they need to feel represented. They need to feel as though that person will help them make their voice heard. And if it's one thing I've said since getting in, it's that it's not my voice, it's yours. It's the voice of the people who elected me, and that's how it should be. Just like I didn't run on like any of that kind of like any promises or anything like that, but I just think that if you want to get involved in policy creation, if you want to get involved in policy formation, find somebody who will listen to you. Like it's the only way. Like you can go and you can contact somebody and be like, oh, I want to get involved in doing this and doing this and doing this. But if that's not something that local representative has an interest in, honestly, you're wasting your time. Now, like, and that's the beauty of local representatives. And I'll be shot for saying this, but that's the beauty of having local representatives from so many different political parties that have such different focuses. There's something out there for everybody, and they will listen to, one party will listen to people on some things, some will listen to people on others. And it's about finding, and no parties as well, because let's be very clear, you don't have to be a member of a party to influence things. So I think that's my main thing would be to get involved in politics, like find somebody who will listen. And there's also the fact that sometimes you don't need politicians to influence policy change. Like being an SPC representative is a way to influence policy change. Being on the Tidy Towns and developing a report for something is a way of getting involved in policy change. I think because you also asked the question of how you can help us to do our roles. Like, I mean, I've pushed to be kind of a champion of like cycle lanes and active travel in the local community. And one thing that I constantly encounter are the people who don't want it screaming at me. But there's so many more people who do want it. But as far as they're concerned, it's like, we'd love to see that. So they don't need to say anything. So like those who are against something will always shout. And I think those who want things, those who see a positivity in things need to start shouting too. Because if all the council sees are the people who are against something, then we start to lose again. And that was another ramble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've always said that, and that has been my experience working in a council as well, that the people who are against the ideas tend to be very, very vocal and very insistent. And, you know, that is why it is great to have a mass of people who can counterbalance that. I think it's really important. And just
on that point, Cliona, I think when we're speaking there, we're talking about, again, two opposites, you know, for and against. And I think that just, again, coming back to the idea of local citizens' assemblies, local, you know, representative assemblies, where people who are against something, they have very valid reasons, and people for it, very valid reasons. But there's third or fourth viewpoints out there as well that might not be sure or have a completely different take or a completely different experience. And I think once our way of giving feedback or our way of developing policy is always about who shouts loudest or who is the biggest group, we're always going to be very restricted in how creative we can be. And yet, when we really have places where we can come together, problem solve. Look at our National Citizen Assembly. We can come out with completely unexpected and much better solutions to issues. So I would hope, just and building on what Chris said, that we could move forward with that, and that's an exciting opportunity coming out of this, and one that I know the climate section of the council will be very interested in as well.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. And one area I'm particularly interested in is participatory and deliberative democracy, where we do try to bring in the voices of all the people. And I'm actually going to do my thesis on the PPN and that sort of engagement and participation, and sort of examining how effective that is. So you know, I'm very interested in, and you both wanted to maybe hear from Jude about her experience on the SPC, and you know, do you feel you're heard, and how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think our experience, myself and I, in the last 2 years has been really positive, because I think we weren't, we were hearing from a lot of people who had done it for a few years, and they were kind of negative about it, but they seem to be stuck on the right way to do things. Whereas I think what worked for us is that we weren't that concerned about the right way to do things. We just got involved with the chairperson, and we just did what we had to do, which was, if there was something that we wanted questioned, or like something brought up, or maybe an update on something, we contacted the chairperson and the director of services, and everybody on the SPC as well. So we kind of just barged our way through it. It was a bit like the Tidy Towns thing. There's a theme here, and it worked. And yeah, I think it's been really good. I suppose personally, I find it difficult because, you know, you don't see results very quickly. So we had a huge input into the county development plan. It was a 49-page submission, I think, Cliona, was it? And so our climate action linkage group really helped with that and everything. So there was this huge submission from the climate action linkage group, and it was seen by the councillors, and it was seen by everything, but it's just too early to tell really what are the results. But I've definitely found that yes, we've always been listened to. We've always been it's been a very, very good experience. We've been listened to, and we've always we've gone with the idea that our input is extremely important, and really that everyone was waiting with bated breath for what we were going to say. But yeah, so it's actually been really good. But I suppose the results of it we don't know until, like, let's see what the county development plan looks like and all that sort of stuff. We did have an input into the action plan for it, but yeah, it's 2 years of work so far. Like, so it just seems very slow. Like, it does seem slow, but I guess that's just the way it is, because there's only 4 SPCs a year, and it's not good. We're not going to see things happening really fast. Just answer the question, Vanessa, or.
Yes, well, very glad to hear it's positive, and as Chris said, if there are any issues or other representatives having a different experience, just to let us know, because we're very happy to talk about that. But great to hear that it's a positive experience. And hopefully we'll get some great actions.
Yeah. And to reiterate what Vanessa said there, like, I mean, it's really good to hear that PPN representation on certain SPCs is working. And again, as Vanessa has said, if there's ever any issues, now obviously you're not on the same SPC as I'm on. I'm on the housing SPC. But if there are ever any issues, or if there's ever any crossover between your SPC and an SPC, because I'm not actually sure which SPC Vanessa's on, because we all tend to focus on our own individual ones for time. But if there's ever any kind of crossover or anything that we can help with. Like, I mean, I know Vanessa and I are like, I'm speaking for Vanessa and I probably shouldn't be, but I know we're more than willing to help in any way we can.
Great, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jude, as well. And can I just say, Jude and Ali have been doing absolutely phenomenal work. I have to say, the amount of hours and time and passion that goes into those SPC meetings is just, it's amazing. It really is. Okay, so I'm actually going to finish up with one final question, and I think we could all talk about this for hours, but I'm trying to be kind to the audience, and I'm just going to ask everybody, is there one thing that gives you hope? So I'll start with Vanessa.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think, as everyone has said, change is happening. And sometimes the bigger the challenge, the better the change that occurs and the deeper that change that occurs. And we are seeing an acceleration of momentum. So I am very hopeful. And I think that, again, what we spoke about tonight was the need for change, but that change cannot just bring us lower emissions and lower an improved environment. It's like the whole system is feeding back to us that it can bring us a much better and a stronger society. And I think once we keep thinking not just externally about the environment and the technical emissions and the scientific, but if we keep bringing it back to those, what we need to do to live, in a just way and in a right way, I think there can be that great fulfillment for society through it and become much more resilient and positive, and a great place for young people. So, we saw before that young people are worried about climate change. And I think there is an opportunity to change that narrative as climate activists, that this is not just a very depressing thing that can happen, but this is the greatest opportunity that's coming to us in our lifetime to rebuild a much better, stronger future, not only environmentally, but also socially. So I'm enthused about that challenge. And I know that if everyone works together, and we all know that if everyone works together, we can all do it. It's imagination and it's about will.
Thanks, Vanessa. And I have to say the thing that gives me hope is this. It's being in a virtual room or a real room with people who are just really passionate and engaged, and you just kind of feel the future's in safe hands, basically. So Jude, is there one thing that gives you hope?
Yeah, I think along the lines of what Vanessa said, I've been to Africa and Nepal with kids, like to do charity work and stuff. And the one thing I noticed is that what they have connection and they have relationship, and they live the way we used to live, but we don't live like that anymore. And we people in the West are lonely. And I do think that, like Vanessa says, living the way we have to live in order to be sustainable is going to break down all those barriers that people have, have people share things, and it's a much more fulfilling way to live. So that makes me very excited. And also that, like, I say to the kids in school, like, they're anxious about climate and stuff. Sometimes they don't give a damn about it, but there's somewhere where they're anxious about it at some level, even if they don't admit to it. That it is a very exciting time for them, because they're going to be working in jobs that are very fulfilling. Because there's a huge opening now for jobs that are about saving the world or saving the planet, and improving the life for people, and improving our environment, and minding our animals, and minding our wild animals, and our wild plants, and all of that. So I think that for them it's a really exciting time, because if you look back into the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the jobs were so boring. Like, we're preparing kids for factories, and now we're preparing kids for really interesting jobs where they get to where they get to, you know, feel that what they're doing is really fulfilling. So I think that's exciting as well. I think there's a lot of exciting things ahead for us.
Brilliant, thanks Jude. Liz?
Yeah, it's hard to put it into one thing, but I kind of was touching on it earlier at the beginning of this discussion. It's just that imperceptible sort of sense at the moment that people are starting to care about this. And I mean, like everybody, right? Now, sometimes that care takes the form of fear and frustration and anxiety around changes, but I still, at least, it's a sense that the message is getting through that this is going to affect every single person, every single industry, no matter what stage they're at or where they are. And that gives me hope that it's like that we're finally starting to break through, that people are starting to care about this issue. I mean, this community, you know, PPN and is full of people who care, and we've always known that. These are people who've been motivated for a long time to do something, but it's actually everyone else we need to be getting through to. And I'm definitely getting a sense that that's starting to happen, and that has to happen for us to make the changes that we need to make across society. And so that gives me hope, I suppose.
Okay, thanks Liz. Chris?
Yeah.
You're on mute, Chris.
You're on mute.
There we go. Now it unmutes. I suppose for me, in the words of Whitney Houston, I believe the children are the future. Young people and children are what give me hope. While climate anxiety is real, and I understand that like a lot of young people are struggling and suffering, I said we all touched on how climate anxiety also drives us, and I think it drives a lot of young people too. And I think a lot of the time, as adults, as public representatives, as parents, we don't give kids enough credit for how resilient they are. I think it hurts them. I think it breaks them, but I think they are what will give me the most hope for anything, because they won't stop. They will not stop. The children of today are the leaders of tomorrow. That's basically it. And I have seen young people as young as 6 march up to a politician's door and explain what they're doing wrong. My God, I never would have opened my mouth at 6 years of age. That's what gives me hope. Young people they're just not willing to put up with it anymore. That climate anxiety that they have has turned into a passion, has turned into a power. And I think what people have to understand is that a lot of these kids have parents that have been involved in, be it marriage equality or repeal or other kind of political campaigns, and they've seen their parents succeed. So what they've seen is when you push for something, you succeed. And you can see that they have that. It's like I don't know, it's like a dog with a bone. They're like, no, I'm not giving up. If I have to walk out of school on a Friday, I'll walk out of school on a Friday. If I have to march up to that door, I'll march up to that door. If me and my friends have to get together and just not let anything happen, that's exactly what we'll do. And that's the beauty, because I feel as though a lot of the times my generation, again, not saying my age, I was about to say but I feel as though sometimes my generation, we pushed for change. We done all of this kind of stuff, but it took us a long time to get to the point where we wanted to push for change. I didn't start getting involved in protesting or picketing or petitions. God, the 3 Ps: protesting, picketing, and petitions. I like it. I'm going to use it. We didn't start getting involved in that until I was like maybe 17, very roughly, but then not again until like my mid-20s. Young people are not going to stop, and that's from ages of like 6 right the way up. There's no stopping them. And if people don't listen, they'll make them listen. That's what gives me hope.
Brilliant. Fionnuala, how about you?
Not to be unhopeful, but I'm not sure if we're going to make it. But what does give me hope is the nature of change itself. it's like the climate change. It's got tipping points. You know, we can see that there's not much happening. Kind of like up and coming athletes or sports stars, they come out of nowhere. No, they didn't. They've been working away, busting their ass in the background year after year after year, no one noticing, and then suddenly they burst onto the scene out of nowhere. They didn't come out of nowhere. But it's the same thing. Like 2 years ago, I would have had conversations with people about climate change and they were still at the, is it real? Whereas you never get that now. Now you have conversations with people, anybody, and they actually are informed. They can have a conversation with you. They know things and you learn things from them that you didn't know. So it's creeping. It's like Liz was saying, it's changing. People are getting way more informed, and there will become a point where it tips over. It's so huge that it changes everything. So that's how change works. It's like the tipping points on the climate. And I think the change in our consciousness and in our beliefs of that we need massive system change, that will percolate out there and it'll become so huge that it just won't stop. So that's my hope.
Great, thanks, Fionnuala. And listen, I think we're going to finish up here, and thank you so much to everybody. I think I personally have really enjoyed the chat, and I hope everybody else has, and hopefully we've given people some ideas of how to get involved in climate action. And just to add, if you are in a group who hasn't joined the PPN, please do join, because it's a great resource for everybody. And so I'll say goodbye now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Cliona.
Thanks very much, Cliona, for a great
Yes,
session.
thank you for
Great to meet
organising.
everybody.
Thanks, Tina.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.